So nothing better to do on a rainy day than come and join me and talk about really exciting things like technology and IT. I'm sure you're all very excited about it. We're going to give everyone a minute or two to come in and join us and hopefully get underway. Today's topic is Word. We are going to talk about some of this kind of newer features of Word, some of the things perhaps we haven't showed you in the past. I say newer, maybe things you don't use so much within Word. So it's a pretty tried and tested product, as I'm sure many of you are aware. But we're going to start really with talking about kind of what we have within Word. But what I want to know before we get going is a little bit of a poll as to how many people on the call use Word all the time, if that makes sense. Just so that we can maybe cut off some of those basic things and just talk about some of the bits that are possibly more relevant to you. With a bit of luck. So you're going to see a little poll up here. Hopefully it'll ping up on your screen any second if it hasn't already. And whilst you're all having a play with that, we're going to kind of cover off what we're going to talk about today. So we are going to talk about Word. We're going to talk about some of those tips and tricks pieces, typical kind of flow for that. We're going to go at a bit of pace. We are then going to talk about Editor, which is part of Word, but also how you can get a little bit more than just Editor if you've got things like Copilot involved in your system already. So we'll show you a few bits and pieces that you can do with Copilot within Microsoft Word. I'm sure many of you might not even know what Copilot is, so I'll talk about that in a second as well. And then we're going to deviate slightly towards something called Power Automate, which is an automation tool, which actually makes a lot of sense when you do lots of repetitive tasks. And then sadly, inside things like Microsoft Word and Excel, we do lots of repetitive bits, how we can possibly speed those things up. So we're going to explain to you what that is. And also for those of you on the call that are interested, something called process mining. So we are going to go through that. Great to see that lots of you use it daily, and then a lesser number of you are using it at least once a week. So, so that's great. So the key thing really is that I'm probably not going to bother showing you how to create headings and styles and things like that, because I imagine many of you have probably worked that out by now. But if you do want to know more about some of that kind of introductory stuff, we have already done a webinar on Word. So it is on our website, and maybe the marketing team points to that as well when they share this video. So again, today's topic then, I should also add, there's going to be plenty of time for questions at the end as well. So if you've got anything you want to ask me, I will do my best to answer it for you. But if there's any kind of weird features or things that you want to know if you can do, I will see if I can work out if we can do it or not. So so we'll go through that. So today's agenda then, Word, we're going to begin with, again, we're going to go a bit of pace today. And as we do with all of these, if you don't worry too much if you don't catch it, we are going to share the video, be available online, and you'll be able to go back and slow that video down and watch bits and pieces. Although I'll try and slow it down a bit today anyway. So, right, here's what we're going to talk about today in terms of Word. Something called dark mode, something called sorting text, dictating, tables of contents, the use of an immersive reader, how we use comments, and also taking advantage of some things called to do with translation. We're also going to then, in a minute, switch to something called Editor, and then we're going to switch to something called Power Automate. So there's more to come after this, all right? So let's start with dark mode, all right? If you are using Word all the time, you know you've got a kind of big white screen, you've got black text on it. Some people struggle to see that. Definitely if the lighting's dark, it kind of hurts your eyes. Well, if you go to the File menu and go to your account, there's an option here called Office Theme, and you may have already found this, but if you drop that down, you've got a few options. You've got something called dark grey. You've also got black, which is the proper dark mode, and more people are getting into the world of kind of using dark mode. It's easier on the eyes, and certainly if you're sat at night working away. But you can see the background goes dark, the text becomes white, effectively all the colors get inverted, and it's just generally easier on the eye. If you change that in Word, it will also change it in PowerPoint and Excel and all the other applications that you use within the Office suite, okay, because you're changing it at an account level. So, so it's quite useful to flick between those when perhaps you're tired, you've had a heavy weekend and your eyes are hurting. So you might choose to switch it around, all right? Now, something that lots of people don't realize you can do is there is a little bit of kind of almost Excel functionality built into Microsoft Word. Okay, so one of those things is text. So I've written out a list of cities there, Tokyo, Madrid, London, but not in any particular order, but I want to very quickly sort them alphabetically. Well, if I highlight them, under your home ribbon, there's a little icon there called sort. You click on sort, it will ask me, what do you want to sort it by? And I can sort by paragraphs or text. I can do sections and whole areas of the document, in fairness. And I'm sorted by text and do it ascending. I click OK, and it just sorts my list for me. Really, really handy little tip, rather than kind of like trying to work it all out. Or what I have seen done lots is copying that list out, put it in Excel, because everyone knows how to sort in Excel, sorting something, copying it and pasting it and putting it back again. You can sort inside Microsoft Word. You can even do maths and algebra, and you can do formulas and stuff. And we've covered some of that in a previous webinar, so we won't show you again today. But it's actually got some Excel features baked into Word that are more than you needing to kind of embed a spreadsheet into a document, which is another thing we see quite a lot of. You can definitely sort and do some maths and stuff within Word as it is. Sum up tables with invoice numbers and bits and pieces. So quite a handy little tip. Next one is dictating. I use this all the time because I'm rubbish at typing. But if in the home ribbon there's an option, there's a microphone icon, it's called dictate. If you click on that, you get a little icon on the side. And as you start to talk, the words will be written out on the page for you. Okay, so obviously you can't hear me saying that, but when I recorded this, I said, good morning, everybody. Thanks for watching this webinar. And it's written that out into the document for me. Really, really useful. Definitely when I'm kind of busy doing something else, or I'm just got thoughts coming to my head and I just want to dictate something down. I want to write something down. I have actually even used it in a meeting where it's not quite as good as Teams because it doesn't know who said what, like Teams is able to do. But within the Word environment, if I just want to capture notes, I just open Word and hit record, right? And it starts to write down some of these phrases and bits and pieces that are being said. And obviously it captures everything. I don't really want to sit there rereading the whole document, but then I can use things like Copilot and AI to say, summarize this for me. What did we discuss? Okay. So if I'm not necessarily on a Teams meeting, therefore I'm not able to record our conversation and transcribe it like you can in Teams, and I'm just sat in a face-to-face meeting, great way of capturing notes. Right? It's just hit dictate and have it write out what's being said. So very, very useful little tip there as well. Tables of contents. This is something that you either, well, lots of people know how to do, or don't even know it exists, in all honesty. So how do you create a table of contents? I'm sure many of you might already know this one. But I've got a big document here. It's got loads of sections in it. You can see there's various headings. So I've got big headings, heading 1s, heading 2s underneath it, subsections, sub areas of that part of my document. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go over to the mailing section. No, it's not. It's in references. Thank you very much. Table of contents. There it is. Right. So we're going to hit table of contents. And underneath there, we've got a few options about the style of this table of contents. Okay. And what we're talking about here is effectively an index at the beginning of the document. Right? I'm going to pick the first one. You can see that what it does is it throws in this sort of dynamic object, which is able to be updated. And it's now found all those headings that I've put in and the page numbers they're on. Now, this only really works if you use headings. If you just write a paragraph and you give it a heading and you make it bold, that's not going to be enough for a table of contents to pick it up. You need to give it a style of heading 1 or a style of heading 2. At that point, you can see that it's going to generate that for me. Now, that's brilliant, but I have to update that table every time I make a change. So I just changed the introduction section, something called welcome. It didn't dynamically update. I have to come and actually click on the table and choose update table for it to reflect those changes. So what we're going to do here is we're just breaking this section out now into various pages. So I'm going to insert a page break, and I encourage you to use page breaks rather than hitting enter and putting paragraphs on new pages because you'll end up writing above it and everything will shift and it'll be a mess. So use page breaks. Another little tip. But now, in order for me to find the new pages, at the moment it thinks everything's on page 1 and pretty much everything else on 2. I click on it, I choose update table, and it asks me, do I want to just update page numbers or the whole table? Let's just do the whole table. I choose OK, and you can now see that it's picked out those sections. That's now on page 2, that's now on page, product overview is now on page 3, design build, etc., etc., etc. So really useful to throw a table of contents in at the start of your document, but before you finish your document or send it off or do anything like that, go in and update that table, and all your pages will go to the right place. If you're using page breaks, it should all just stay on the right page. If you've sat there and hit enter, 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 enter after a paragraph to push the next bit onto a new page, what you'll find is you'll push the table of contents in, and it will be really, really, really long, and it will push everything you've just done onto different pages below it because it's right at the top of the document. So bear that in mind. This is why we use the idea of a page break or blank pages or whatever we want to do to manage the position of the document inside Microsoft Word, rather than hitting enter, 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 enter. So go and have a play with that one. Okay. So table of contents, really, really useful. Obviously, the great thing about it also, if you export this document or you save it as a PDF, those links become clickable. So when you look at it as in a PDF document, you click on the table of contents on design and build, PDF document will jump to that section of the PDF. So again, another really useful thing. You'll need to, and it just does it by, out of the box. So you don't need to do anything clever, but it allows you to have a more dynamic, easier to use PDF document, right? Immersive Reader is quite a cool one. So we've covered this a little bit before, but we'll go over it again. Across the entire Microsoft 365 estate, they bake in accessibility tools for people that are visually impaired or struggle with hearing or whatever it is they might need assistance to use their IT equipment with. So Immersive Reader is one of those tools, but it's actually got a really cool function within it. So to get to Immersive Reader, I've grabbed a document. So Great Expectations, Chapter 1, Charles Dickens. That'll come into play a little bit later on. What we can do under here is we can go to the View tab, and underneath View, you've got something called Immersive Reader. And if I click on Immersive Reader, it basically gives me this new canvas for the way that I want to view my document. I can't change anything in here, but I can look at it in a different way. So I can make the column width wider or narrower. But the important thing is I can change the background color. Rather than it being white all the time or black, as we saw earlier, I can actually just choose a color that's easier on my eye, just full stop. If I struggle to see black text on white background or black text on blue backgrounds and things like that, I can tweak that. I can also put it into focus mode. So actually I look at particular paragraphs of text. Again, quite useful if you struggle, if you're struggling with attention and bits and pieces like that, and focus on a particular line. And then there's a few tools that are quite useful for maybe younger readers. So if you're in the education industry, really, really useful. I'm sure you're aware of this if you're in the education industry. But you can even break things down to like syllables. So you can see family there is family. They're great for people that are learning to read. Great if you're just doing it at home with your own kids, actually, to be fair as well. So, but the feature that I want to call out really that I use quite a bit is read aloud, right? If I'm doing something else, I just need something read to me so I can half ingest it. Then what's happening here is that little grey box jumping across. If we were listening to that now, then the computer would be reading those words out. Okay, and I can actually just sit and listen to a passage of text rather than sit there and to read it. Gives me a bit of time back, allows me to do something else at the same time. Obviously, does require you to be pretty good at multitasking for that to work. But sometimes it's easier to have something read to us anyway, full stop, right? So Immersive Reader is really, really good. And actually, if I were to open that document in the web-based version of Office 365, so if I opened it online, effectively, that Immersive Reader is even more feature-rich, okay? And it actually has the next piece we're going to talk about built into the Immersive Reader. So, quite cool. We've got using comments, something that people don't use very often, actually, surprisingly. So we've got a document here, and as I scroll through it, it's got loads of bits and pieces in it. What I tend to see happen is people attach a document to an email, send it to their colleague, and say, here's a bunch of comments about that document. Paragraph 3 needs this changing. Paragraph 2 needs that. Point 1.5.9 says I need this doing. But actually, if I highlight an area of text and I create a new comment just by highlighting it there, I can actually write in my thoughts around that particular section of the document. Okay. And the other key thing is that I can @ people, and that's the bit I want to focus on really, is the fact that I can go and @ Sam, for example. This is a bit of content in a document I need Sam to do, and I'm going to assign it to Sam Smith. That gives him a task. When I send that, it's going to say, well, okay, this is great, but the document you're working on currently saved in your OneDrive. Sam hasn't got access. Do you want to give him access? Yep, no problem at all. Let's share and notify. Now, what Sam's going to receive is an email with my comment, okay, and a link to this document. And when he clicks on that link, it's going to take him into this document to the correct point in the document where he will see that comment. And as I hover over it, it's going to kind of slightly pink out the bit that I'm referring to. And maybe I've asked him to give me more context as to why that's there, or do we need that, or maybe this needs rephrasing, or I'm not happy with what you said for whatever reason. Fantastic in any industry where you're managing sort of multiple versions of documents, or you've got lots of collaborative effort. And of course, I could invite lots and lots of people to this. So I might say this section's all, I need Sam to confirm that he's happy with what I've said there. I need Darren to agree with X, Y, and Z. I need Lee to accept X, Y, and Z part that we talked about in another part of our contract, maybe. So at that point, collaboratively, we can all work on this document without this email going around with 6 versions of the email and 20 different bullet points and people making them red and green to say we've dealt with them. you can track those changes in a document using that comment. Okay, so really important. The other thing to say, very useful at the end of the document. Now, if you're writing a document out and you're going, oh, I need to remember to go back and deal with that, I need to sort that out, just highlight it and put a comment saying I need to do, I need to look at, whatever it might look like. Because within that comment section, I can also tick the box to say I'm done and I'm happy. I appreciate it's disappeared off my screen for some reason, but I can tick the little comment to say I've completed that comment. So if I've left myself a bunch of tasks to go back and review, leave little comments, tick them off. And at the end of your document, before you send it to your customer, you can say, have I cleared all my comments down? Yeah, okay, I'm happy the document's dealt with. Or I can put a thumbs up next to it, or Sam might put a thumbs up next to it saying, yeah, it's sorted. And you can also have another little chat in it. So if you're not using comments, really encourage you to use comments. There's an option in there under review, I think, where it says, what sort of markup do you want to see? If you change that to show markup, you'll see all your comments. If you change it to no markup, it will hide all your comments, okay? So if you're looking at documents with loads of comments in, they're getting in the way, change your markup to no, so basically none, and it will get rid of them. Okay, one more for you, translation. So this is the thing that was in Immersive Reader online, if you use that, but translation, quite a cool thing. If you're dealing with international customers or colleagues that don't, maybe English isn't their first language, you can do things where you can translate. So I can translate a section or I can translate a whole document. So if I choose a section, I highlight some text and choose translate section. I'm just going to do the whole document. And you can see here, it's going to say translating from water to text. So great, we'll leave it as that. And let's change it into Dutch. So I hit translate and almost instantly the whole document is translated into Dutch for me. Again, multiple uses here really. Obviously, if you're dealing with international customers, then very useful to you, for you. Again, sort of along the same line as Teams translation when you're having conversations in a Teams meeting. Effectively the Star Trek Universal Translator, as I call it, showing how geeky I am now. I get that. But also, one thing to point out is that your comments also get translated, which is actually a little bit annoying. So if you need to translate a whole document that's got comments in it, you need to highlight all the text, sadly, and then just translate that section rather than the whole document. Otherwise, all your comments get translated to Dutch, and no one's got a clue what it says in that scenario. So, unless you speak lots of languages, obviously. So bear that in mind. But it also really, really good if you receive information. Let's say you're dealing with a supplier that comes from somewhere in Europe, and the T's and C's that you receive are in a different language. You might want to translate them. Now, I'm sure every single legal customer on the call has just said, Scott, what are you going on about? Obviously, I'm not suggesting for a second that if you translate a foreign language into English and its interpretation is going to be sound and solid and you're going to rubber stamp it and be okay. You obviously need to go and get someone to check that and get some legal support and advice. There are some amazing translation tools, probably better than what we're showing you here in all honesty, but bear in mind this is here, brilliant for internal conversations, communicating with colleagues that maybe work in a different country, or sending a quick email to a customer or sending a document that's perhaps not legally binding. So don't ever translate a legally binding document and send it, I guess is what I'm saying. But hopefully that one's obvious. Right, so a couple of little nuggets there for you around just other bits and pieces inside Word that we haven't covered before in the past. What I want to talk about very quickly now is editor. So we are all hopefully been using Word for a while. In my day, we used to get to spell checker by hitting F7, okay, and it used to come up and tell me all the things that I'd spelt wrong. And that has somewhat evolved. That's now evolved into this editor tool, and you'll see that in the ribbon, on the home ribbon. You'll see editor on the right-hand side. Looks like a pencil with a red lines coming out of it. So what we've got here then, I've chosen a document, and I'm regretting choosing this document because in theory, this is a literal genius that's written a document about Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. Right? Chapter 1 shouldn't really be anything in there that's wrong, right? It's written by Charles Dickens. But of course, editor, by clicking on an editor, I get this window up and it gives me a score. It says, well, this is 90% decent in Microsoft size. I get a few choices around the type of writing that we're reviewing here. Is it formal writing, professional writing, or casual writing? And we'll explain why that's important in a minute. But you can see as I change that, the little numbers in the boxes below start to differ. So we've got one spelling mistake, 2 grammar errors. If I put it to formal writing, it's saying, hey, there's one issue with your formality of something you've written. So if we go through these bits and pieces, we can see in the actual document, we've still got these sort of squiggly lines. So we've still got blue lines for grammar issues and red lines for spelling mistakes. But if I click on my spelling, it's going to take us to that spelling mistake. And it's saying, look, this character's spelt wrong. I'm willing to bet that it's whoever translated this into a document, not Charles Dickens that spelled character wrong. But by clicking on it, I can just choose a suggested character. Great. This one, it's saying under grammar, it's saying, I call myself Pip, comma, and to be called Pip. I might just decide to accept it, right? It's telling me I should put commas in. So I go, yeah, okay, fine, accept that, accept that. That's going to help me produce more formal writing because I've chosen formal writing at the top. There's some points in there about clarity, right, and formality that are still coming up. And it's really important to think about the text that you're writing. It's not necessarily that important that this document is clear because it's a novel. So if I choose that, you can see that it's saying who or what did the action would be clearer is editor's issue with that particular sentence inside this. Now, it's a novel and maybe it's deliberately worded that way, so we can ignore these. We're happy to say, I don't mind, I'm happy with that. I've done that for a reason, just going to ignore it. I'm just going to ignore it. All right, and we're going to go through all the clarity. And it won't flag these things for me again going forward. It's happy that these things make sense. All right, so we're going to ignore those things. Now we've got a little tick next to clarity. So we've got a tick next to spelling, tick next to grammar, etc., etc. Formality, it's saying, don't cut my throat, sir. Terrible line, I appreciate, but never mind. And it's telling me to change it to do not do that. However, what's worth saying is that that's a quote of a character, and obviously changing that don't to a do not makes that character much more formal suddenly. So actually, might not be the right thing to do. So it is very much about the content, but you can ignore these things. The end goal here is that you're looking for that editor score to be 100%. Okay, you've ignored certain things. You said, yeah, I've changed that spelling, X, Y, and Z, and we end up getting a much richer end result in a document. And there's a whole bunch of other things under there. This is more than just spelling now, okay, and grammar. There was a piece in there where it talks about effectively geopolitical acceptance in a nutshell. One of the things it's checking for is anything you've said inside this document, could it be socially acceptable or interpreted in the wrong way? Okay, and that's really powerful in my opinion. So certainly if you think about how widely the English language is used, right? It's used all over the world, but the words we use in the UK have different meanings in different countries and may be seen as offensive sometimes. So it will flag those sorts of things for you within your document. So if you do a certain amount of international trade, really useful thing there to make sure you've just covered your back and you've not said something that might come out wrong or socially inappropriate or anything along those lines. And of course, you can choose to ignore those things then if you choose to. So, but inclusiveness is there. That's another great one, you know, in terms of social awareness of what we're writing and what we're putting out in the public domain. But formality, conciseness, clarity, grammar, spelling is so much more than just F7 and a spell check nowadays, okay? But it is still pretty static. So all it's looking for is words and whether there's a comma there. It's not necessarily looking at the meaning of the sentence behind it. And that's probably where we bring in a little bit of AI. So for those of you that have got Copilot, and within reason, I know lots of you have now got it kind of at home and you're using it online and you're using things like ChatGPT, different conversation. But within Word, if you've got the Copilot, Microsoft Copilot license, that basically builds ChatGPT into Microsoft Word for you. So you can work live on your document using ChatGPT. So we do this by effectively enhancing what we've just seen with editor. Hopefully that's playing. Yeah, there we go. Right, so we can click on our little Copilot icon on the top right-hand corner, and I can say to it, okay, this is a literary genius that's written out a load of text, but how can I improve? Perhaps how can I improve the readability, I should say, of this document? Okay, so I'm asking Copilot, I've written this document out, it's all grammatically perfect, we've just got a score of 100%, but give me some other ideas around what I can do to make the document more readable, or what I can do to change the tone, or what I can do to address a different audience, or whatever it might look like. Now, remember, this document is written, you know, how many 100 years ago, maybe something along those lines. And obviously the content within it and the wording that's used within it could be a little bit difficult to understand, a little bit difficult to read today. Okay, so Copilot's great at doing things like translating. We'll almost see that in a second. But it's going to take a minute. This is a big document. It's got loads of text in it. I literally just opened it up and asked Copilot. It needs to assess it. It will take a minute whilst it works out how it can improve. Okay. So here it's going to say, let's do a few things. Let's break up long paragraphs. Okay, fine. Let's use headings and subheadings. So you see chapter 1 is just a piece of text. It's not a heading as such. Simplify complex sentences. Okay, fair enough. Maybe we should do that. And it's going to give me a few little references. These little numbers on the end, 1, 1, 1, are areas inside my document where that makes sense. It's also just, use bullet points or lists. Again, forget it. But we've got to remember what this document is. It's a novel, right? Now, Copilot is built really to tailor and work well on business documents, right? If we're sitting there, to use something that Sam mentioned earlier, which I thought was a great example actually, which was if I'm sitting there on a beach reading a novel and it starts bringing out a bullet point list of information inside the novel, I'm going to think I'm reading a marketing case document, right? Bullet points don't really work inside a novel, do they? So maybe they do, but without a real kind of clear need. So I'm not going to say this character really likes hats and shoes and gloves and bullet point those things out. I'm just going to say they like hats, shoes and gloves. So Copilot, again, probably in this scenario, without giving it more context, then it's going to give me this kind of idea of how to structure out a really good professional formal document. If I'd said to it, help me make this document more readable in the style of a Victorian novel or in the style of a novel or a story or whatever, it probably isn't going to start suggesting that I use bullet points as an example, okay? So it's all about giving AI in this world more context. And this is where some people struggle with AI because their prompts are probably not well rounded enough. They've probably not got enough content. And it's coming back with its own sort of bias and opinion of what it is you're trying to produce. We're sitting here using a productivity tool that we use for writing letters and then asking it to kind of query this document, this text that I've written down. It's taking it in the style of still being a letter of some sort. Okay. We need to say, make it a novel. So quite a powerful tool though. I mean, really, really good for understanding the content that's underneath it. To some degree, will understand what I'm trying to say. That's evidenced more in this example. So this time, rather than me just saying, how can I improve it, full stop, what I'm going to ask it is how can we improve the grammar within the document, okay? So we're going to put a prompt in. Can I improve the grammar further? Again, these are very short, kind of bleak prompts for a reason. There's a concept called GCSE, all right, which we've done in other AI webinars where we talk about how you give your prompts goals and expectations and sources and this sort of stuff to get a much better response. So again, if you're interested in anything that we're seeing at the moment, go and have a look at that. But this time it's come back with some examples of actually areas within the text that maybe don't make complete sense, but could be reworded and make them grammatically easier to understand. So the top one there, my father's family name being Perip and my Christian name being Philip, etc., etc. It suggested we just say my father's name was Perip and my Christian name was X, Y, and Z, and basically I couldn't pronounce anything more than Pip, so I just said Pip. It's taken that oldie worldy English language, and whilst I'm waffling, feel free to read the other suggestions, but it's taken that kind of oldie worldy 100-year-old language, which maybe is a little bit difficult to understand, and translated that into still English, obviously, but in maybe a modern day tone. So much easier for us to read and to understand. And it took a few seconds for it to kind of go through and get that. So if I've factually put words down on the Word document correctly, they're all in the right sentence, they've got commas, they're spelt correctly, grammatically it's okay, then AI can take that to another level and say, look, just rather than worry about one sentence, why don't you just restructure that whole paragraph so it looks like this? And you phrase it out in a different way, and it can understand the relationship between different paragraphs in the story and suggest maybe you move things later on or earlier on. And of course, we're using a story deliberately, but the same thing applies within any sort of business document, which is obviously the focus of today. So bear in mind that AI is brilliant at pushing the boundaries beyond just spelling, grammar, and conciseness. It can now look at the context of the sentence and the paragraphs that you're creating. What are you actually trying to say? What are you actually meaning by what you've put down in words, rather than editor that's just looking at the words? Okay, big difference. One of the things, since we're here talking about AI and Word, we might as well show you what we can do in there. So let's ask it to draw me a pencil-based sketch based on this text in a Victorian novel style. Okay, so if you didn't know, obviously, if you use ChatGPT, then Copilot can draw us pictures. So what it's going to do now is it's going to read that big long string of text, and it's going to formulate a bit of a picture that makes sense. Okay, about characters that are in there and maybe what they're wearing and where they're positioned and this sort of stuff. And after a few seconds, it's going to spit out some options for me, right? And that prompt could go further. I could say, do a painting rather than a pencil sketch, or do anything I like. So it spelled out me out 2 pictures. Brilliant. No worries at all. I'm going to create a bit of space for me to put that picture in. I'm going to select one of the pictures I want. I'm going to choose insert, and bang, it's put a nice Victorian pencil sketch straight in the middle of my document. Okay, so really, really cool, really, really powerful. Saves me searching around the internet trying to steal people's pictures. And that brings us on to a good point around copyright. Obviously, if you do this, bear in mind that image potentially is subject to copyright, because it may be based on content that it's sort of brought from the internet elsewhere. Okay, so if you say, draw me a picture of the Nike logo and put it in the middle of the document, chances are that still qualifies as being copyrighted, right? This one's probably a bit grayer, but if there's a really famous painting or something that it's decided to use as the basis to draw that picture, and it's taken that painting and just put like an artistic effect on it to make it look like a pencil drawing, then again, you're probably still in copyright land, right? So bear that in mind if you are going to publish any of this stuff externally. Right, so hopefully that's kind of introduced you to a few bits around Microsoft Word, all right? So we had kind of tables of contents, we had dictation, we had the immersive reader and reading aloud, we had the editor element with spell checking now and how it's advanced in probably the last 5 years or so. We've also got the ability to bring Copilot in to even enhance that further. But something that I want to deviate to and just talk about for a few minutes is something called Power Automate, okay? And what we find within Word and within Excel and within all of these platforms that we use in the 365 world is that we do lots of repetitive tasks. So one of the things that I want to introduce is this tool here. Now, you can use this tool within your 365 license to a limited amount at both an organizational-wide level and a personal level. So you can create yourself your own Power Automate flows if you choose. And this is all about speeding up the things that you do inside Office 365. So what is the Power Platform? Very, very quickly, for those of you that are interested. We've also got a poll, sorry, very quickly, it's going to pop up. Just to say, basically, have you ever heard of Power? I'm interested to know who even knows this thing exists. Okay, so if you do see that poll, please feel free to pop an answer in there for me, give me an idea. But you might have heard of some of these tools, Power BI possibly. Certainly, if you're in the kind of management area of the business, then you're probably looking at data and information. Power BI is all about data and information. Power Apps is about creating mobile apps off that data. Power Automate is all about streamlining and efficiency and being quicker at what you do. And also meaning there's a concept without plugging another product, but it's got a great name. It's called If This Then That. If you've ever used If This Then That, or you've ever had it, or you know anybody that's used it, they've probably raved about it. It's been around for a number of years. That's an automation tool. That's what Power Automate is. It means if I do this thing, I want you to automatically do this other thing. All right, that's basically what we're talking about. When I write a cell into a spreadsheet, go and do this thing. Send an email to somebody or save this document somewhere. When I receive an email, respond to the email, for example. All right, and we're actually going to give you a little example of that in a minute. So quite a few of you never heard of it, which is exactly what I thought. So if you are in a position where you're looking at your business and looking at how do I automate, streamline, and improve efficiencies, this is a great tool. If you're just looking at using Word and Excel and PowerPoint, you want to speed up what you do, again, another great tool just for you to use yourself, right? It's a bit like a mailbox rule. If you use mailbox rules in Outlook, right, where you kind of redirect things, what we're doing is expanding that beyond Outlook and emails to say, when I save a document somewhere, or I drop a document in a folder, automatically save it as a PDF and email it to somebody. Very, very powerful stuff. Right, we're not going to linger on that bit too much, but there are lots and lots of connectors for Power Automate. What we mean by that is they plug into lots of third-party applications, which means if I use something like Salesforce or I use my online cloud-hosted project planning tool, because these things have something called an API where they plug together, when I create a new record in Salesforce, I can have it export a document, save it in my Teams environment, and then share it with all of my colleagues, for example. So it allows you to abstract and extend everything that you do within your Salesforce environment and bring it into the Microsoft world. Or it might be that you create a flow that just says, when I create something in Salesforce, when I save my quote, if you're in the sales team, for example, save my quote into my customer folder, go into that document, rip out all the information that I need, and automatically create a new quote inside Salesforce. Now, I don't need to log into Salesforce and type in my quote details in. I'll just save my document in a folder and it all happens for me magically. But there are loads and loads and loads and loads of connectors for thousands of third-party applications. Some of those things you might see that you use, but these are all the native sort of plugins and things that you can go and snap this into. So let's keep going to give you a bit more of a context of what on earth I'm going on about at the moment. There are two versions of Power Automate. One's web-based, and there's also a desktop version. This one's probably more important and interesting to some of us. If we use applications that require us to repetitively click on documents, click on menus inside our CRM system or within a tool that we use within the office, right? So maybe I go file, and every day I've got to load an invoice onto the account system. Okay, it's not cloud-based, it's running on my desktop, and therefore I have to go file, I'm making this up, but file, new, invoice, load onto account system, because that's how easy that is, I'm sure. But what we can actually do is record those clicks. So we can say, rather than me constantly having to click all this stuff, what I want to do is do it once and record where I went. I went there, and then there, then there, and I clicked on this menu, and this menu popped up, and I typed this piece of information in, and I hit save. Okay, well, using things like Power Automate Desktop, you can record that, create something called a macro. If anybody's kind of used to that in the old days from Excel, it's a bit like a macro, I should say. And then you can give it a whole list of numbers that you're going to type in and say, just go and do it. And it will just go off there and it will sort it all out. It will just move your mouse around and type everything in for you. Okay, really powerful tool from an end user's perspective as well. Okay, but a few different ways of doing that. You can use Excel automation, which basically means it does a load of stuff in Excel. So if you do lots of churning in terms of data, web automation, which means it goes and deals with websites and inputs information into an online cloud platform potentially. Desktop information controls everything about your computer. Click start bar, open up Microsoft Word, write a load of stuff in, save it, move it out, convert it to a PDF, do what it needs to do, right? So you can automate everything that you do within reason. Okay, you obviously still need a bit of an understanding as well. But a little example of something that we can do here. This is actually Power Automate that I'm showing you here. One of the questions I get asked all the time is, I want to save a bit of time by responding to customers' emails. I get an email in, okay, and I want AI to respond to it. Generally, the first thing everybody asks me for, right? So I'm going to show you really, really quickly how you can do that within Power Automate, and it's actually quite simple. I say it's simple. If you know, slow the video down and feel free to go back and have a look. But I've gone in within Office 365. I've gone to Power Automate. It's an app that will appear inside 365. And I'm going to create this kind of logic flow. So this is what we call a trigger. That's this first little box you can see in the middle of the screen. It says when a new email arrives. And then I create actions underneath it. And I'm choosing something called an AI builder here. Okay. What I'm going to say within this AI builder is that when a new email arrives in my mailbox, I want you to do something to do with AI. And I get this little window up that says, give me a prompt. This is the same as ChatGPT now. Okay. So I'm going to say, you're a customer service representative. I've received an email that requires a courteous and upbeat response. Could you please draft me a reply that conveys gratitude and positive tone throughout? So what this is going to do is I'm going to receive an email into my mailbox, and AI is going to generate a response for me. All right. Now, I'm not necessarily recommending you put this into production, by the way, but what it's going to do is, rather than me having to try and write my reply, I'm going to get AI to have a stab at it for me before I even write my reply, right? I'm not going to go into too much detail about what I'm doing here, but basically I'm taking values, I'm taking the email body. So when I say, you're a customer representative, I've received this email, and I give it email body, it's getting that value from the box above it in that flow where it says, I've received an email. It's getting the email body and showing it into this prompt, okay? Once I'm happy with all that stuff, I can go away and I can test these prompts, and I can have a bit of a go with it. Okay, so let's test it, see what happens. So it's going to make up an email. All right, it's going to come back in and it's going to say, hey, how you doing? No problem at all. You can see there it says, dear customer name. You'll also see at the bottom that it said from your name, your position, It doesn't know who I am, right? So actually, that's not very personal. So I can go and change my prompt slightly. And I'm going to say, sign off the email, kind regards, Scott's Kitchen. Okay, no problem at all. Happy with that. Let's try that again. Let's see what we get at the bottom of this time. Perfect. Kind regards, Scott's Kitchen. So I can sit there and tweak this prompt, is what I'm saying, to generate a much better response. So if I know that I always want to get an email back out to somebody from our complaints mailbox, for example, this is not a bad way of just getting something back out to the customer saying, hey, we've received your message. We understand you're upset about it, but here's what we're going to do now. Here's the process. This is our complaints procedure. And you can get that out instantly without somebody needing to pick that up and deal with it. Okay. So we've created this little prompt. It's got an idea of what it is we want to do, but now what we need to do is add another action. All right. So we've got the email being arrived, and we now need to send an email out, basically. All right. So we're going to go and add another action at the bottom. Lots of different connectors there. That's what we're looking at down the side. I'm going to type in Outlook. And this time we are going to expand that slightly. Lots of different things we can do with Outlook. So I can send an email, receive an email, move an email to a different folder. I can do all the things that you'd expect to see with Outlook. And all these functions exist in Microsoft Word as well. Create a paragraph, delete a paragraph, write text in, add a picture, all sorts of things. So what we're going to do here is we're going to say, this time I want to send an email. So where's the email going to go? We're going to look back to that very original box and say, send it to the person that we received the email from, so the from field of the original email. We're going to put a subject in there. We're going to type a name in for something that we're doing. So this is going to come from Scott's Kitchen. And then in here, we're going to put in the value of our little AI response. Okay, again, don't worry too much about what we're doing here. It's just an example of how you can do that. All right, wonderful, no problem at all. So I've created that flow now, right? We've got from. Now it isn't going to actually send from that address. I want it to send it back to me for a minute, just for the purpose of demonstration. So I'm going to put my email address in there. Hopefully you don't all bombard me with loads of emails, but you can probably work my email address out. But there we go. So effectively what's going to happen, we're going to receive an email. AI is going to generate a response, and it's going to send an email back to Scott Weedon in this case, all right, with a formulated response. Now, this whole process, I haven't sped this video up. This is all happening in real time, okay? It's taken us probably about 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, okay? Obviously, it needs lots of tailoring and adjusting and bits and pieces, but that flow is now live. It's now ready to go. Okay, if I go over to my Outlook, into my email client, you can see now that if I go and send a new email, and I send an email into Scott's Kitchen. So this is that first step of that flow, right? So an email is coming in and it's being received. It's going to automatically trigger the other things to happen. So we're going to send an email to Scott, feedback, and I'm going to say, I was extremely unhappy, something along those lines. All right, very unhappy. I toned it down a little bit. Very unhappy with the service I received. Perfect. Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to send it off. Now, I've said I'm very unhappy with the service received last week. Now, of course, you could use AI to go a bit further. You could say, like, let's look up that person's email address. What table did they set out last week? Apologise for the fact that that table was right in by the window and there's loads of sun. You could do loads of things, right? But the more context that email has, the more you could craft a response. But I sent the email. Now we're going to go back to Power Automate and we're going to have a little look down here. We've got to have run history at the bottom. If I refresh that, you can see that that email landing inside the mailbox triggered a flow. That flow is now running at the bottom there. And if I refresh it again in a second, it should succeed. Okay, and that means that the thing we built a minute ago with an email coming in, AI creating a response, and then sending an email straight after will have completed. Let's see, succeeded, brilliant. So if I go back to my mailbox now, we should have got an email, processed it, and sent it back, and it will have come back to the same mailbox. So let's go and have a look at my mailbox again. And there we go, wonderful. You can see that the latest email that I've received was, dear customer's name, thank you for reaching out to us and bringing the concerns to our attention. We sincerely apologise for the negative experience you received at our restaurant last week. Got that out of the email. We strive to provide excellent service, blah, 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 blah. Now, I might choose to give a discount coupon or whatever I want to do, okay, or deal with it. But you can see there that it's created that. Now, it needs refining, right, because it says, dear customer name for a start. Not ideal. But obviously, with a bit more work and a bit of tailoring, you could get that to respond to John or Wendy or whatever it might have come from, okay? So in about 3 minutes, we just built a flow that does something that everybody thought was incredibly complicated, and we did it in 3 boxes in about 4 minutes. Now extend that idea to things that you can do inside Excel and inside Word and inside PDF documents, inside other parts of your business where things happen. People save a document or people make a change to a Word document or update something inside Microsoft Word that actually then you just want to create a whole new block, right? It might be that I save a project handover document and I save it in a folder. When I save it in the folder, I want this flow to go and build me a brand new Word document with an onboarding sheet from a template that's got a load of stuff pre-populated from the content inside the handover document. Okay, so there are lots of ways of using this tool. It's completely flexible. But again, going back to the context of today and Word, this is a great way of streamlining how you use Word, and not needing to sit there writing loads of stuff out. You can get AI, you can get Power Automate to build a lot of this stuff for you, and you're going to go in and start tweaking and changing that stuff. Okay? So quite an important one. And since we're talking about processes, I'm going to zip through this bit. This is probably more interesting to those of you in the sort of senior management area of your business. There's something called process mining within Power Automate, and the idea behind this, we have talked about this before, so I apologize if we're going over it again. But there's a concept that allows us to look at everything that's going on inside our business and map out our processes. And this is baked into Power Automate. Very, very powerful. What it does is it allows us to effectively create a process mining or a task mining an option. Right? Process mining is looking at effectively visualizing a map of everything that occurs through the process. So maybe you've got a sales order process. So what things happen in your sales order process? I'll explain how it works that out in a minute. Versus things like task mining, where we're just looking at individual tasks. How long does it take to do something? One individual part of a bigger process, right? You can drag data in from all sorts of different places. And by dragging this data in, that's what allows us to understand how processes move within your environment. Because the chances are that almost every process in your business is no longer paper-based, probably largely digital to some degree, all right? At some point, someone typed a record into a CRM or saved a Word document or edited a Word document or made a change somewhere or sent an email, or all of these things happen. And when those things happen, they create timestamps inside the IT system. They say this email referencing this project was sent at so-and-so. So you can see that just with that example, an email for project XYZ was sent at 3 o'clock. Well, now you can track that, can't you? So what was the next thing that happens after that project email gets sent? And when did that happen? We can start to map out the time taken for things to happen across our business. And we can pull data in from loads of stuff there. Excel workbooks, text, CSVs, Excel documents, whatever. And we end up with a list that looks a bit like this. I'm not going to hang on that. I appreciate it looks really geeky. But effectively, these are things. An invoice got processed, or an invoice processor. These are all things that are happening. And if you look at that column on the right side, it says activity name, invoice entry, check customer payment, credit memo entry, refund customer, reissuing the invoices. These are all stages within a bigger process, okay? And we've got timestamps when all this stuff was happening from the IT systems, from various different disparate platforms, potentially Salesforce, your ERP system, your Office 365 environment. All of these things get collected together, and it allows us to create something that looks a bit like that. So effectively, that is a flow chart. Data comes in at the top. There's various choices and options around where things go and where they go and how quickly they go. You can see that in this scenario, we're issuing refunds, let's say. It's taking on average 2.39 days to issue our refund through that process. Okay, very, very useful information. Okay, but what we can also say is it creates a map, so you can see how many. So the top there, we've got 133 invoices were entered in this process anyway. 65 of them had to go to confirming payment received. 68 of them just went to checking customer payment. Of those 68, it went to credit memo. Of those 68, it went to refund customer. And those 68, it went out reinsurance. Nice and straightforward. The other ones went all over the place. All right, and there were various times. If we look at that, it'll also tell us how quickly this stuff happened, right? You can see that on average 2.54 weeks for the first bit. I appreciate those a bit extreme, aren't they? But the really important one is the one that we've highlighted as a box there. You know, there's a section there called completing the customer memo, and that's taking 2.94 weeks inside a bigger process. Well, that's great for the senior management team to go and then have a look at that section of the process and say, why is it taking 2.9 weeks? Is that because everyone's absolutely overworked and there's too much of this coming in? Do we need to hire there? Do we need to automate there? can we cut that system out and find a quicker, better way of doing it and improve the quality of the output to the customer? So very useful. And if you're able to put money against it, you can even calculate how much it's costing you to do these things. So one of the things I want to say then really is that off the back of all of that Power Automate stuff, I appreciate some of that probably looked a bit technical and a bit complicated. But if there's something there that you're looking at that you want to do across your whole business, then it's very useful to engage and understand what you can do with Power Automate. Okay, we've started this conversation talking about Microsoft Word and how we use it at the end user's perspective, and we finished this conversation talking about how we can manipulate tools like Word and Excel and other areas of the Office 365 suite, and tie that to things like your organizational processes to streamline and get better at using these tools. Okay, and these things work best with tools like Microsoft Word. Don't get disillusioned that Power Automate is only for the automation of entire business-wide processes. It absolutely doesn't have to be like that. It can totally be about just streamlining the creation of a Word document for you at an end user's perspective. But it can also be, because it's so powerful, be good enough to go and kind of map out your entire business processes. It's also powerful enough to automate some of those things. Find out those areas where individuals are repetitively putting the same information in or creating things inside Microsoft Word or Excel or whatever other application they might be using, and look at streamlining that and saving that individual their time. And that's important. You can save their individual their time, gives them more time to think, more time to focus and deliver a better quality to your customers. So if you need any help, you want more conversations around Power Automate, it's a huge topic, not enough time today to talk about it, but I really encourage you to come and talk to us because we can help you orchestrate and style and build out a Power Automate workflow for your business, certainly as it stands at the moment. Right? So hopefully, appreciate we had two fairly different things to talk about today, but they do kind of interact with each other. If you want to learn a bit more about it, then obviously go off to the for the technical people amongst you, or even if you're just wanting to find out a bit more about IT, go and have a look at the Microsoft training stuff. Obviously, there's lots of information in our blogs and the webinars that we've done previously that cover Word. So if you found some useful things in there today, there's a whole load more in webinars we've done in the past. Equally, if you are a tailor-made customer, you can go into your portal and you'll be able to find a load of training content in there around Office 365 if you're interested in doing more training. And as always, if you're not entirely sure, go and ask Copilot, right? And if you go, where do I get Copilot? If you don't buy it, go into Office 365 and just on the homepage, there's a big thing there that says Copilot now. You can ask all sorts of questions. That information, big difference between that and ChatGPT. The stuff you ask inside Office 365 is containerized to your Office 365 environment. You're not breaching copyright. You're not breaching GDPR rules necessarily if you start asking questions or pasting bits of information in there. But you need to clarify that with your senior management team and make sure you're allowed to use it. But go and ask Copilot or go and ask ChatGPT, how do I do this thing in Microsoft Word? And it will show you how to do this, or explain it to you at least. So I think we've got a few minutes left. So thank you very much for joining me. If you've got any questions, feel free to fire them over into the chat window, and I'll give it a go. So brilliant, we've got a load already. Fantastic. So we've got a question here saying, can this be used to automate forms, i.e. on submit email to? 100%. Absolutely kind of what it's designed to do. So if you're using things like Microsoft Forms, absolutely, you can fill a form in, even if you're using SurveyMonkey or any other third-party application. Using those connectors, you can bring that back to Power Automate and you can automate that. So basically anything you can think you do inside a Microsoft application, when you physically do something, you click a button or you type in a box or you save a document or you move something, that acts as a trigger. That trigger can then do whatever you like within the 365 environment natively, but it can also push out to third-party applications. So I was having a conversation with somebody yesterday about this, and one example was that they wanted to, when they dispatched an engineer to go to a customer's site, as soon as they're in their system, they kind of flag that piece of work as engineer to be dispatched or engineer on way. It would plug into a third-party SMS platform and send the customer a text message. Perfect, no worries at all. So very, very powerful, but yeah, fill a form in and it can take the information out of the form or out of any other document and send an email off to somebody, and that in its own might act as the trigger for the next part of the process, and this all just gets chained together. Okay. Would appreciate more tailored examples of Power Automate being used in different. Yeah, perfect, no problem at all. So there's effectively lots and lots of ways of using Power Automate. There are loads of it. So I've given you an example today of how you can reply to an email, right? And how you can use AI to even format that email. You don't have to use AI to format the email. It might just be that if you get an email into your complaints mailbox, you've got this templated email that goes back and says, thank you for your complaint. Here's our complaints procedure. This is what's going to happen over the next couple of days. Obviously, it doesn't need to be just about that, right? It could be you receive an email from a customer into your sales mailbox, right? They're on your marketing list. And actually, you can go and look the data up on your marketing list and go, oh, yeah, that customer was there. And here's the information we gave them a few weeks ago. We gave them a discount code. So let's reply to them saying, look, we gave you a discount code last week, but we'd like to give you an extended discount code, right? Because you're engaging with us or whatever it might look like. In my example of somebody complaining about the poor service they had in a restaurant, you might decide to give them a coupon to come back again next week. All right, and then hopefully they have a better experience. So you can do all sorts of things with it. But in answer to you, yeah, happy if you want to reach out to us, have a chat with us, let us know what industry you're in, and we can provide you some tailored examples. So, or equally, if anybody's got any ideas that they want me to do a whole session on that, I'm quite happy to do a whole session on loads of examples of different Power Automate flows that you could create for different industries. It's not a problem. We've got, so if you're not a customer, how do I access the training? Fine. So a lot of what we cover is done through these webinars. So if you go to our website, which is www.tmtech.co.uk, go to the blog section, there's a whole bunch of webinars in there where we cover all sorts of things around Office 365. If you have a look at the quick description, it will tell you what we're talking about within those areas. Again, or just reach out to us. You know, if you, as I say, if you are a customer, then there's even more training within our customer portal where you raise your tickets and you look at your ticket positions and things like that. And all the data that we provide to you is from our support element. There's a section on cycle training, and in there's a whole raft of training around Microsoft and Adobe and all sorts of different things. Okay, so whatever you might like to see. No problem at all. Let's have a look at the next one. Perfect. So we've got a few other questions. Basically, lots of you asking me to do more examples of Power Automate. Absolutely fine. Okay, I think I'm getting the gist on that one. That's no problem at all. I can tailor that out and create some more bits and pieces with that. That's fine. And apologies to the individual. Apparently, my screen is very blurred, so I apologise. So we will take a look at that. I would say I'd get the technical people to look at it, but there isn't anybody else I'm going to look at than me, is there? Really? So so I say nobody else. I guess I'll get one of the guys to come and see what's going on with that. Perfect. Perfect. So we've got a couple of people saying that they'd like to go and look at the previous website, the webinars on the website. So that's great. Encourage you to go and do that. Okay, I think in terms of questions, I think we've covered the questions. So look, really appreciate it. We've just gone over the hour, so I apologise that we've taken a bit longer. But look, if you've got any questions, you want any examples, you want to go into Word in more detail, we can come and do this stuff with you anyway. But thank you very much for joining. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll catch you in a couple of weeks when we do another one. Thank you very much. Bye bye.